And thank you. What an amazing turnout. You kind of run counter to everything people say about civic activism in America today, which is, what passes as politics, whether it's Fox or MSNBC that you watch. It's people shouting at each other, not listening to one another. The intelligence that you bring to your presentation, the humor, the humanness, and the fact that we have a little bit of a small town hall meeting in here gives me a lot of hope, despite the 16% turnout that we saw, that we may be able to actually cobble back together something here, because I don't think that politics should be in the future or in a distant place. It should be right here and right now. I remember after the election was over, I told people, watch, the next day they're not going to be talking about how do we solve this nation's problems. They're going to say, who's running in 2016? And indeed, that was the first thing. We're always following things in Washington, but a lot of people can't name who their school board member is. Many people don't know their council members, though here, certainly with the great Bill Rosendahl, and now with the great Mike Monin coming in, we've been very lucky with great representation here. So thank you, first and foremost, for being here. I'll be straightforward. I'm running for mayor because I want Los Angeles to work again. And I mean that in two ways. I want it to get back to work. I want to jumpstart the economy that was always the engine of prosperity here. I don't want to have a city just of those of us lucky enough to get a good education, have a decent job, and be able to survive even a downturn in the economy, and those too poor to leave, but nobody in between. I don't want us to be so divided with the traffic that is caused by, for instance, for every 4 jobs that exist in Santa Monica and west of the 405, there's 1 unit of housing. So 3 jobs drive in because we didn't put the jobs back in the center of the city where people live. I want to make sure that the city itself, though, works again. And I mean City Hall. I want it to work so that when you call, you get a call returned in 24 hours, like we do in my office. So that when you see a problem, you can identify it quickly, tell us, and we can begin to get that resolved. So that you have faith in the most basic level of government again. And that doesn't happen with lofty plans. It happens one problem being resolved at a time. My mom grew up here in Brentwood. My family went here to University Synagogue. My parents now live in Brentwood. We moved here my senior year. So this is very personal for me. When we talk about traffic, I am that person who's got a daughter who we have to figure out when her grandparents are going to see her. She's 1 year old. We're actually spending the night here tonight in Brentwood so that we can have some good quality time together when she wakes up, because traffic is so bad so many times. And I've seen the changes that have happened here. And trust me, if you want a candidate who's going to have a Jewish mother bitching about the traffic every single day, vote for me, because I've got her. And she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. But she only drives between 10 and 2. Because in the morning, it's impossible, and in the evening, it's impossible. And while it's great to see what's going to be happening to ease things up a little bit, we see the trend getting worse and worse. We're like lobsters slowly boiling every year and wondering suddenly why we're about to die. The toughness of the problems we face will not be solved by some silver bullet, some magic program, but it'll be a series of a lot of hard work, small sacrifices, but getting the job done. Coach Wooden used to talk about to his players at UCLA that small things are vital. He said it's small things that lead to big things. In other words, you can't just win championship after championship after championship if you don't do the drills. My baseball coach is here today. He taught me that too, Bob Spivak. I got to throw out the pitch at Encino Little League this year, which was a lot of fun, to Reggie Smith, one of my heroes. And you do those drills and you do the small work so that you can produce big change. I took over a district that is in the heart of Los Angeles, kind of from Hollywood to downtown, Hollywood, Silver Lake, Echo Park. Neighborhoods that had been bypassed for many years. You remember what Hollywood was like 15 years ago. There was actually a study in the late 80s that an average tourist came there and stayed for 23 minutes. They'd go to the Chinese theater, take a picture, see drug dealers, prostitution on the streets of our most famous neighborhood, and they'd leave, they'd go elsewhere. Silver Lake had empty storefronts. Echo Park, where my wife and I moved to when I came back to Los Angeles and she moved here with me, we'd have gunfire every weekend. It was emblematic of where the entire city could have gone. But it also today, I think, is testament of what happens when neighbors do come together. Some of the most thriving neighborhoods we have, not just in Los Angeles, but America today. Forbes magazine just called it Silver Lake, the hippest neighborhood in America, which is probably the beginning of the end if Forbes is calling you hip, but nevertheless, it was an unthinkable title 10 years ago. Because we focused on that pocket park, on that median, on that farmer's market, on what I call urban acupuncture, a small act of something that transforms the health of the entire body of the neighborhood. Echo Park was just named by the American Planning Association a couple years ago as one of the 10 best neighborhoods in America. Atwater Village was just recently voted best neighborhood in LA in a popular citywide blog. Hollywood, Bloomberg News said, is roared back into a second golden age. And so that experience of neighborhood turnaround, knowing that each neighborhood is unique, that I couldn't do in Silver Lake what I did in Echo Park. Echo Park is different than Hollywood. Brentwood is very different than Boyle Heights and San Pedro from Sylmar. But traveling this city for the last 556 days of this campaign, from early in the morning to late at night, the personal sacrifice that I've made along with Wendy. We are away from our families, from our friends, but we both believe in this city deeply. And I get to see that street view of each neighborhood and what it requires for turnaround, but also fly over the city like a bird at night and see that 30,000-foot view of the lights laying out like a bed of diamonds and emeralds, each one of them representing a story, a hope, a dream, and seeing what connects us. It is time to make this city work again. We need a strategy for putting our economy forward. And I come before you as the council member, it's number one in jobs growth. There's a yearly report put out by the Chamber of Commerce, and in the midst of recession, I'm up in jobs in my district, up 5% this past year. Number one in new business growth. I have a plan to get rid of our city's business tax, which Wendy and I worked on a while back to reduce it, but it's still the highest tax in the county. And so we've lost 165,000 jobs while we've added 800,000 people to the city. That's not sustainable. We have to find those key industries so that young people, not just what's happening that I'm spending probably a day a week with this Silicon Beach, the new digital information companies, the internet companies that are starting here on the west side, in Culver City and other places. But let's bring that to Silicon South and have, in South LA, kids who are learning science and technology and engineering and math in the classroom, so that the new factory job, which is no longer probably assembling a fighter jet, may be working in Silicon Beach in an internet startup, so that those folks have opportunities. Let's bring technology to how we provide services so that, and there was a launch citywide finally today of a smartphone app inspired by this, and Mr. Krikorian, Paul Krikorian and I had one, but a few years ago we developed a smartphone app called Garcetti 311, and you basically take your smartphone out and you take a picture of a pothole or of graffiti, and because of the GPS in your phone, we know exactly where it is. There's a drop-down menu, and 20 seconds later you've reported something to us. And 2 days later, when you check in and you see that that pothole was filled because you did that, we've transformed you from a pretty skeptical, maybe even cynical recipient of government to an active participant in the transformation of your city and your neighborhood. Those are the things I want to bring to City Hall, that can-do spirit, that neighborhood turnaround, and at the end of the day, also a proven track record of making tough decisions. And that is a decision and a contrast for you to make in this race. We face the toughest fiscal times in the last 4 years that this city has ever had. We had our fiscal house burning. It was projected this year we would have a $1 billion deficit in the city of LA. And the easiest place to be is on the sidelines, but sometimes you have to jump into that burning home and to figure out how you can save it. And we went in there with pension reform. It doesn't win you allies, it doesn't always get you endorsements, but it's the right thing to do, hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts, in pension reform, in controlling our healthcare costs so that we could get the city. This year, as we look at our budget deficit, that $1 billion is $155 million as we look at what we're going to do moving forward. So I'll wrap it up so I can hear questions, but that is a contrast of making sure that you have a mayor who is going to be able to say to the people of Los Angeles, the services that you deserve come first. Above anything, some powerful interests downtown from any side of the spectrum, that this is our city, and time to rebuild not just a big city, but a great city once again. To make sure we get those 5 transit lines, that tunnel through the Sepulveda Pass that can get you from Sherman Oaks to UCLA in 5 or 10 minutes, to think bold and to think big and to do things the right way in this town once again, because that's what Los Angeles was like for me when I was growing up. I'd be so honored to have your vote on May 21st, but whether you vote for Wendy, whether you vote for me, talk to 5 people tomorrow and 5 people the next day and see if we can get what will probably wind up at about 20% turnout when they count all the ballots, up to 25, 30, 35, even 50%, because who the mayor of Los Angeles is more important to your daily lives than even who the president of the United States is. And yet 3 times more people voted in November than just voted. Thank you to the Brentwood Homeowners Association.